Bigger than Capes.
Give me some of that sadness.
I was looking forward to it, and then I watched it.
Oh, dry.
Hello, and welcome to Bigger Than Capes. I am Angela, and this week I have been joined by Will. Hello.
Hi, Angela. How's it going?
Going all right. It's been a whole week.
An entire week, and here we are.
Here we are
Back
again. Yeah. Different book, though. People will be glad to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not just going to do Kill Lock over and over again.
No, it was very tempting, but ultimately I decided against it.
Fair.
Which is fair enough. Before we get on to the book, which we will get onto shortly, have you any news that you wish to catch us up on? Anything you've been doing of interest?
I'm not sure I can honestly say it's of interest, but I've still been in a very gamey mood. I think I said the same last week. I've been playing a lot of Hades, which is very, very excellent. And Nintendo had their Direct that revealed quite a lot of good stuff, including a new Super Mario movie.
Yes.
Fronted by Chris Pratt, which I think is just, what a sideways move that was.
He's no Bob Hoskins, is he?
I didn't know, that's true. And where was John Leguizamo to recapture his role as Luigi Mario? But actually, it kind of made me think, if it ends up being like Lego Movie with Mario, I'll probably enjoy that.
Yeah.
That'll probably be all right. Can't say like I'm chomping at the bit for the Mario movie, but
I don't think anyone was. I think that we have this IP and we must use it.
That's it. But it seems like a pretty decent cast. So let's see what happens. Going with a little optimism, perhaps.
We'll see. It is mostly, this is what gets me about these films, is it's all like, it's actors, it's celebrities. And I'm like, there's a whole voice acting community out there, guys. There's a bigger pool.
Indeed.
And, sometimes it's a different ball game, voice acting. And some actors can make the transition really well. And others, it doesn't sound great. But Chris Pratt has, of course, done stuff before. So we shall see. I
think that's it. He's got a bit of previous, so
he's got a record.
He'll probably be all right. But I think that could be okay. And a bunch of cool looking games announced. So I'm pretty pumped for games.
Are you any further along with Fortnite? Because you mentioned last time that you had done a little bit of Fortnite.
I've had a few more games. I didn't want to kind of oversell my sort of adoration for the game. Like, I think it's a pretty well built game, but it is what it is. And I think reality's hit a little bit. I've not continued to win every game that I've played, but I feel like I'm competing. So I think maybe the first 5 were just, beginner's luck.
Ease you in gently.
That's it. And then I've won a couple more since then, but I've also not. So that's slid off a little bit, but it's dropped down my kind of priority of plays at the moment. So Hades has drifted to the top, and I've been sinking quite a lot into that.
How far in are you on Hades?
I've got to the end, and I've died against the last boss. I've only got there once, but it's one of those kind of rogue-like games where you just start from the beginning again. So there's only I think there are 4 or 5 sort of dungeons, each with a boss at the end, and they're randomly generated each time you go through them. So I've made it all the way through to the end once, and I kind of didn't expect to clear it straight off the bat, but next time he'll be waiting. Or
the one after that, or the one after that, or at some point in the future.
Forevermore.
Forever. Yeah. One day.
How have you been doing, Angela? What have you got going on?
Things. I've not been doing well. I've been trying to catch up with the backlog of reviews that I have to do for Bigger Than Capes. Those of you who read the website, I apologise. I've been busy. I've been busy with a library, that just seems to. You wouldn't think that books were that complicated, and yet it's not so much the books; it's the building they're housed in, to be honest. But yeah, so I'm hoping that'll calm down in the next, decade.
Yeah,
Might be nice.
That
Might
would
be nice. Next couple of weeks, hopefully, we shall see. But yeah, I've not anything. There's never anything interesting going on with me. Particularly at the moment, I've not really been watching anything that will interest anyone apart from me. Possibly.
They're the real joys, though. So much time I spend sometimes watching TV because I think like other people all talk about this.
Yeah.
And so rarely do I sit down and watch something that I think nobody but me cares about this, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So I applaud you for it.
Thank you. I have been having a go at that and watching films that, again, nobody cares about but me. But it makes me happy. So there we are. We've got a bit of comic book news, which we will touch upon briefly, purely because it's not even indie comic book news, to break it to people particularly.
Precisely.
It's tangentially related. It's
indie adjacent.
Yes, it's indie adjacent. IDW, that indie publisher, they are an indie publisher. They have been publishing for quite a while various younger age comics based on popular IPs, one of which is Star Wars Adventures, that I've touched on briefly because I think we mentioned it with Zach in the Summer Reads podcast, and you touched upon it briefly in the Licensed Properties podcast. But yeah, IDW are no longer going to be able to publish Star Wars Adventures, or the younger end of the Star Wars comics market, which is a shame because they're good comics, and IDW are a nice publisher. But everything must be housed under the House of Mouse, I'm guessing.
I think that's it. I don't think they're necessarily going to stop. They might be renamed and sort of regurgitated, but I think one of the big mistakes that not just Marvel or Disney specifically, but the industry as a whole tends to make is making it really hard for new readers to get in.
Yeah.
And I think these Star Wars and Marvel adventures were really good because they were very simple one-off stories in general, or would tie closely with the films that the kids have already seen, so they know they know everything about it. And I think Marvel do have a tendency of just retitling books that is a continuation of a previous book but now has an entirely different name, or of course spreading that story over 6 monthly books.
Yeah, or we just relaunch a number one every 6 months.
Yeah, quite. And I think they might be at risk of doing that here, where kids know that they like Star Wars Adventures, and when it comes out as something else, they're not going to see that, I don't think. But I don't know, maybe they carry on exactly as they are and they just wanted a piece of that pie. But it's a real shame for IDW. They've still got Turtles, the best one.
They've still got Turtles. They've still got My Little Pony and Transformers as well.
And Sonic.
And Sonic, yeah.
Sonic's a big one for them, I think. So yeah, I think they'll cope, but I'm sure that is a big part of their market share came through those books.
Yeah, it's a shame. Well, that was the news, such as it was. We are not doing an IDW book. We did that last time. It was called The Kill Lock. It was really good.
It was. You did complain about their physical production.
Their physical production. I don't know what the physical production of this trade is, because the physical trade is not out until the 5th of October, according to Amazon. Other book publishers or book stockists are available, but that was the easiest one for me to go to. But it exists digitally. The trade is out in digital format already. It is an Aftershock book, and it is Scout's Honor. And those of you who have read the website or listened to this podcast will know that I did an interview with the writer on Scout's Honor some while ago, many months ago. And and I have done various reviews and shoved them on the website because it's a book that I really, really like. We first did it in January. We did issue 1 in the January roundup.
We did.
And now we're revisiting it in trade and seeing if that early promise has turned into something.
Yeah, I remember us all being pretty positive.
Yeah.
In that first read through that we had.
I can't remember where it was on everyone's lists, and I didn't have time to go back and listen to the podcast to find out. But I'm pretty sure it was either number 1 or number 2 for most people. So
yeah, and I think, to be honest, you have to move from one thing to the next so quickly. I can't even remember what it was up against.
No, nor can I.
If I could remember that, I could probably tell you where I put it, but
I'll have to go back now and listen and go, oh yeah, it was that book. The creative team behind Scout's Honour. So the writer is David Pepose. As anyone knows, I'm a big fan of all of his work. We've covered him several times on this podcast and in a previous podcast live. So he is the writer. The artist is Luca Casalanguida. The colorist is Matt Miller. The letterer is Carlos M. Mangual. There are various other people listed, people who did the covers, Andy Clark with Jose Villarrubia, and variant covers by Brent Schoonover with Kurt Michael Russell and Manhouse. Charles Pritchett designed the logo, and the back matter designer. I'm just going to name these people. Corey Breen was the book designer, and Christina Harrington was the editor. So well done, Aftershock, for actually crediting all those people.
Absolutely. You ticked everyone off the list.
On your front. So as is tradition, as in we did this last time, so I'll do it again, we'll just read the blurb off the back.
Oh, hit it.
Yeah. So, years after a nuclear apocalypse, a new society has arisen from the ashes, and their Bible is an old Ranger Scout manual. A young Ranger Scout named Kit has endured the harsh survivalist upbringing needed to conquer the irradiated Colorado Badlands. But after discovering a terrible secret once lost to history, Kit must risk everything on a dangerous quest to uncover the truth behind the Ranger Scout's doctrine.
Actually, a pretty good blurb.
It's not bad. That was the Comixology blurb.
Yeah, that kind of gives you what you need to know. I'm sure I would have said this at the time, but the basic premise of this book is right up my street. That kind of idea of a society built on a random book. I mean, not an entirely random book, but like essentially a scout manual. That entire way of life is built around following the end of the end of society. It just, I can't quite put it into words, but that it ticks my boxes as a starting point. You've already got me there.
Yeah, it seems the most, like I say, it's quite a random book to base what is essentially a society and a religion on. And I don't know if I would have picked that as a thing, but it works because sort of these groups of, you know, I don't want to say that scouts and guides and brownies and that sort of thing are cultish. But something that did come up this week on Twitter that I noticed was someone was questioning the way that you're inducted into the brownies, which involves, you know, being spun round and promising and looking in a mirror and swearing on a toadstool. So I can kind of get that there are cultish elements to these traditional.
Wow, that is
all absolutely true as well.
That is that's a divergent in life experience, because for balance, I was a beaver, a cub, and a scout. I went through all 3 tiers in my youth, and certainly in the scouts, there is a lot of both religious and royal. I don't know, like you say, doctrine, I suppose. Yeah. And you salute. There was a picture of the Queen in the scout hut, and I think you swear, you make a promise to God and the Queen. It's been a while now, I forget, but nowhere was the sort of Germanic fantasy tale that apparently the brownies have to go through.
No, I can recite the Brownie Guide Promise as well, which is slightly worrying, but it goes, and it is quite cultish. I promise that I will do my best to do my duty to God, to serve the Queen and to help other people and to keep the Brownie Guide law.
I think the Scouts one was probably fairly similar, but yeah, I've forgotten a lot of it now. I
But
was
yeah.
there for the penknife, to be honest.
See, we didn't get that in Brownies. It was sewing. You got a needle. You got a needle in Brownies.
The Scouts are going camping. You girls, you're darning socks tonight.
Pretty much. That's how
what
it was.
fun. Probably, well, hopefully not anymore, but I don't know. I'm not involved in those circles.
No, nor am I.
Outside of comics. I was going to mention, as you say, it was a bit of a random idea to base it on. But I read this at a similar time that I read Black Badge. And I think there was at least one other comic. And I just thought, like, there's an awful lot of Scout comics out at the moment. It didn't kind of pick up into anything, but I think kind of like 2 or 3 definitely sort of settled in at a similar time.
But yeah, it does certainly, the idea of Scouts as a cult, I feel, is not that far removed from reality to a certain extent.
Absolutely. And I'm sure there's something different with, I'm sure American kind of, well, they call themselves Ranger Scouts, don't they? Is probably another thing, again, above our timid British version. Yeah,
where you go camping in Wales in the rain.
Yeah,
it's a bit
rather
more,
than fighting bears.
Yeah, because they do. I mean, that's what I like about the very start of this book is, and there's going to be spoilers, so if you've not read it, stop now, go and read it, and then come and listen to the podcast. But I like the fact that from the start, it's you get a bit of, you get a page of what an apocalyptic wasteland looks like, but then you've got these 3 Ranger Scouts in the woods basically tracking an animal, which I imagine is what Ranger Scouts in America, they, like you say, they track bears and stuff, and then one of them ends up getting killed.
Yeah, pretty immediately.
The stakes are really high from the start. It's like, these are not your average Scouts. These are not, normal things that Scouts are doing. No, they're being attacked by basically mutant boars in the woods.
Yeah. But it's scouting as a religion and as a way of life, isn't it? Like everything is about the Scout code.
Yeah, I mean, you even have, like, again, this is just even the first issue, is you have the statue of the founder, Dr. Jefferson Hancock, stood holding up the scouting laws like Moses holding up the 10 Commandments. I mean, you can't get more on the nose than that. That is a really obvious parallel in the art. It's just like, yep, here's a guy who's founded a religion.
Quite, yeah. It's got all of the iconography.
Yeah.
So the story that we actually follow then is Kit. I think, as you've mentioned, it's worth perhaps saying again, but it is a trade review. We are going to be talking about stuff, what happens. So if you don't want it spoiled, come back later.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Because particularly with Kit, there is, discussing Kit's character, there is an important twist, shall we say.
Yeah.
Which we're not going to avoid. We're not going to avoid touching on. So.
No. But when we meet Kit, it's made clear to us that Kit is the kind of best young Scout around.
Yeah.
And that Kit's best friend, Des, is kind of the second best around, but is pretty jealous about the fact that he's not number one. And that's kind of compounded by the fact that his dad is the Scoutmaster Shepherd.
Yeah.
So his failure is looked upon extra harshly, I think, by dear old Dad.
Yeah, Dad expects Des to be the best, and Des is trying his hardest. I mean, he's not a bad Scout. Like you say, he's like the second best Scout in the whole group. Mm-hmm. But Kit's just a little bit better. And I do like sort of, you've got this friendship between Kit and Des, because Kit realizes that, there are issues between Des and his dad, and doesn't want to get involved and doesn't want to be the one, but the reason why Scoutmaster Shepherd's, like talking down to Des. Yeah. But at the same time, Kit wants to be the best. It's really, I really like their sort of friendship, because on the one hand, Des really likes Kit as a friend, and they're very close. But on the other hand, they're also bitter rivals, and it's they flip-flop between the two sometimes, and I really like that relationship. I think it's interesting, and Scoutmaster Shepherd sort of is milking the tension between them for all it's worth, is like pitting them against each other almost, and it's almost like he's deliberately talking up Kit to just, really annoy Des, and like, why can't you be more like the worst sort of parent who's always like, why can't you be more like so and so, and he's like, why can't you be more like Kit, and he's not nice, Scoutmaster Shepherd.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it adds in loads of tension like that because, as you say, their relationship's a pretty good one, Kit and Des, but there are times when the circumstances and their individual sort of aims are at loggerheads, and they don't always get on. It's worth noting as well that the society set up by Hancock, or at least the doctrine in which they live under, is a extremely patriarchal one.
Yes, only, and this comes into play with Kit, only boys can be Ranger Scouts.
And really can hold any form of authority in this society from top to bottom.
Yeah, the women are basically there to be looked after, essentially. I think we see that. I can't remember which bit of the issue or trade it is, but I think there is one point where they're just like, oh, go back indoors to the woman. I can't even remember. I'm sure that did happen.
Yeah, I remember it also, but not specifically where.
Yeah, there we go. I found it. It is in issue 1 again. But yes, it's like Kit sees a woman being dragged down and bearing in mind she's dressed very modestly, she's got her head covered, she looks a bit like, a pilgrim from the oldie times, and she's been dragged down this dark alley by a man with a knife, and then Kit sort of punches the guy in the face, and she's just like, oh, thank you, sir, is there anything I can offer you in return? Like that's how women live, is to, be at the mercy of men.
Indeed. So the big twist comes for Kit then.
Yep.
When at the end of issue 1, we discover that the best Ranger Scout around is in fact a young woman.
Yes.
Who is obviously hiding her gender from everybody else.
Yep.
In this mad super male testosterone driven uber competitive society,
and is holding her own, in fact is the best, like you said, the best Ranger Scout. And it's that there's a full page reveal of Kit wearing bindings, but at the same time it's like, yes, but also she's quite muscly, she's not
ripped.
Yeah, exactly. She's not. She's been pumping iron. She's clearly a very fit and healthy individual, but then, you just see the binding, you're like, oh. And I did talk to David Pepose, like, is Kit transgender? And the answer is not necessarily.
Sure.
It was. I'm trying to think back, but I believe it was more that she feels like her identity is being a Ranger Scout, and if to be a Ranger Scout she has to pass as male, then that is what she'll do.
Sure.
So that's where the identity thing. So we're okay to refer to Kit as she, if needs be, is what I gathered from that conversation.
I mean, that seems fair. And I think that is kind of explained throughout the book. Like, despite everything that happens and the discoveries that are made, etc., Kit is always a Ranger Scout first. Yeah.
And what I like is, going back to the idea of them as a religious cult, which is true, is that Kit basically becomes, and she has this whole almost religious revelation, almost like Paul on the road to Damascus kind of level. And it's like that, she's a true believer. Like, it's not that Dr. Hancock had ridiculous ideas. It's that those ideas were used incorrectly. And she is the true disciple, the true believer, and she's going to bring back the real religion almost, as opposed to what the Ranger Scout religion has become. She's a true believer, and she's going to take it back to how it should be, not the way it is now, which is very resonant for our times, I feel.
Yeah, and some of that. But we also find that the Ranger Scouts kind of exist for a different purpose, or did exist for a different purpose, in a way to try and like reform delinquent youths, to use an old term, to try and sort of reform young offenders who had exhibited like violent tendencies, and but specifically male young offenders, and try and teach them kind of practical survival skills, a la the Scouts, and as if to almost form a like militarized division of of wayward youths. And of course, it all goes belly up, doesn't it? And they turn on their masters, and I'm not sure at what point nuclear devastation happens.
Yeah, it's unclear. I mean, we get all of this background, I think, comes, or some of the truth about it comes from Kit stumbling across the robot disc thing, however you want to define it, called Weblo, who plays the recording of basically Dr. Hancock being killed by the, as you say, the delinquents whom he was trying to reform. But it's unclear when that happened with regards to the apocalypse. But having said that, it's like you see a flashback to Kit's childhood when, I don't know how old she is, maybe 10, something like that, when her, after the death of her mother, and it looks like it's sort of a caravan of almost refugees who were attacked on the road by the highwaymen, and they were rescued by the Ranger Scouts, but we don't again know when that took place either. It's interesting. I don't necessarily need to know, but it is interesting, like how far into things did all this occur.
Yeah, like we get the impression that the world has been this way for quite a long time for these people, because they sometimes refer to things in the old world and don't understand what they were for. So at least the kind of main set of characters don't remember the world prior. But I just wonder, with the Ranger Scouts kind of taking over their masters, did that coincide with the nuclear threat?
I have just flicked back to issue 1, and basically, there we go. So the Ranger Scouts emerge from their underground bunker 260 years before the events of Scouts Honor, when Kit and Des and Eddie, R.I.P., are in the woods. It says 260 years later, and then it's a panel of them.
Gotcha. Right. That makes sense.
And then, and interestingly, before that, there's a bit like 9,562 days since the bombs fell. So that's quite a lot of years. So it's so many years before that the bombs fall, and then the Ranger Scouts come out of the bunker, and that's when it all kicks off. And then 260 years later, this is what they have built.
I mean, it's some kind of society anyway.
It's almost, see, the thing is maybe, I wouldn't necessarily say Mad Max-esque. But
it's certainly got that vibe, but it's not got that same kind of idea of like a barter system or anything like that. It feels like they've kind of got a farming system going on. They have a way of life, and it sort of functions despite it being uber violent and competitive and hierarchical. They kind of excuse it by being that it is survival. And it is, like, that's all it is. It's probably not a fun place to live by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, because you've got, in opposition to the Ranger Scouts as well, you have the highwaymen, who seem to exist outside of the walled town, with hockey masks and guns and big knives and the like, and they sort of attack people who venture beyond the walled city that the Ranger Scouts have created, seems to suggest.
Yeah, you don't totally get to see too much of the outside world in a sort of functioning sense. So I wondered throughout this book, like, how much of what the Highwaymen do is just propaganda. And of course, you do find out later on, like, there is an actual like devious connection between the Scouts and the Highwaymen. But when you actually finally meet the Highwaymen, like, they seem to be doing similarly well to the Scouts in their own way.
Yes.
And they're definitely portrayed as being kind of violent and aggressive, but like, so are the Scouts. They tend to kill everything they meet that isn't another Scout. So I wonder if it's kind of 6 or 1/2 a dozen of the other when it comes to the Highwaymen, and they're perhaps just as scared of the Scouts as the Scouts play them up as the big boogeymen. They're
sort of two sides of the same coin.
Perhaps,
every religion needs a devil.
I think in that, and some of the other things we've mentioned, is where my kind of slight criticism, I think, overall for the book is. And it's not one that kind of takes away too much, but I think I would have liked it if it was a bit longer and it went into some of these things a bit more. Kind of the fact that Kit is female sort of ceases to matter after a little bit.
It kind of comes back with the bit with Des, and the fact that Des is, okay, spoilers, Des is not straight.
Des is attracted to Kit, the male.
Yes.
But then I would argue that Kit could have been a male, and that story beat still works. The fact that Kit isn't, it doesn't mean they kind of get together at the end and Des suddenly turns straight. Like,
no, and
their
thank
relationship
God
is
for that.
No, definitely that's not something I would ever prescribe. But I mean, it doesn't resolve in any other way. And I think how her femininity, or how her being female, works against the society, I don't think always goes into in enough detail, and what it means for the society for a woman to have sort of infiltrated the Scouts and have become the number one. It suggests a lot of things, and I just don't always think it goes into a lot of detail. I appreciate the fact that when you're making comics, you don't know how long you're going to get, and maybe planning for 12 plus issues is a risky game. And for the story it's telling, I'm very happy with the arc it goes through and the characters go through. But it seems like a really interesting world, and I kind of wish there was just more detail about how the things fit together. As we say with the Highwaymen, some things are suggested about who they are and how they live, but you never really see much in depth about other parts of the world and how they are maybe coping or not coping with the same situation.
Yeah. I think it's very much sort of Kit's story, and the focus is so heavily on Kit that the other stuff doesn't get fleshed out to the same extent. I mean, interestingly, sort of at the end, that I've just realised, sort of something to do with Kit being female, is that there's a child who comes up and sort of says, how are we going to do this? How are you going to rebuild the world, basically. It comes from a child. And it's interesting that child is a girl, and it's sort of, and Kit sort of picks her up and is holding her and sort of explaining stuff to her, and it's the only time that it sort of seems to, it's almost like this little girl can grow up now in a world where girls can be Ranger Scouts, perhaps. Who's to say?
I think the message is there, and I think the purpose is clear and very well meaning, but I'm just not sure it's followed through on enough. And I think that's, as you've said, and rightly so, like, this is Kit's story, really. It's not a big blown out societal kind of tale. It just happens to be set in a very interesting backdrop. And I guess what I'm saying is I wish there were more of it. Which isn't the worst criticism in the world.
No.
But, there are things like, as you say, Webelow, like jellyfish-like.
Yeah.
It's like a disc with tentacles that floats about. Suggests the society that preceded this one. but we never really see any more of that. We don't kind of touch on too much more of that. We see a couple of like different mutated animals throughout. You mentioned the boar, and later on Kit gets a companion, Tenderfoot, a ginormous spider that she rides around, which is super rad. But again, maybe it'd be quite interesting to see how the society kind of lives in conjunction with these ginormous animals. Like, can you eat a radiated boar? Is that a food source, or is that
They do. They have it tied up and cooked at the feast that also doubles as Eddie's funeral. And
is there, like, I'd like to see, you know, are there any problems with that? Do they? Are they all?
There's
all
no panels of
irradiated?
them. Yeah, there's nothing of them throwing up afterwards. But who's to say? But it even has like the classic apple in its mouth as well. I mean, it's
excellent. But it's like I say, it's a very minor complaint to have, really.
Yeah. No, I get that. I find that. I mean, I don't sort of. I'm fine with not. It would be nice to know more, but I'm fine with what we have, because what I find with David Pepose's writing, which is why I like him, he's very much a character guy.
Yeah,
it's less about the world building, although the OZ, there is kind of some world building there, but that's building off a world that kind of already exists. I don't know, but what I really love about all his writing is the character work, because I really, really like the character work in this with Kit and with Des, and they're the focus. And yeah, it's a strength, I think, that. But I totally get what you're saying about wanting to see more of the world, because there are many, many questions, such as how do spiders get that big?
Well, while I don't want to sort of pigeonhole myself, I think in general I do quite like those broader, worldwide stories where it is about kind of you know, top-down narratives of huge events and that sort of thing, and how worlds work. But that's not to say I don't like purely character-driven things. And in that regard, I think it does it really, really well. One thing we haven't talked about at all is the art.
I was about to say, we've not talked about the art. We should talk about that, Will. So go ahead.
I think it's that really excellent balance of like cartooning and realism. It's not attempting to be photorealistic by any means, but people are proportioned realistically, and the environment looks like real things. You know, I'm just looking at the moment of a workshop, and it's got filing cabinets and things like that. And, you know, it's not cartoony. I think it shines really brightly, and it's like it's action. You know, it's movement and it's momentum. There are quite a lot of moments of like hand-to-hand fights, or they have a kind of Star Wars-esque speeder bikes.
Yes.
They go through the desert. And what have I got here? I'm in the second issue at the moment. There's a bit where Kit like attacks some highwaymen who are torturing her dad.
Yes.
Glenn, and that like coloured in shadows and stuff, as Kit sneaking around and, you know, using kind of tricks to thin out their numbers. It just looks great, and I think it really carries a momentum. Yeah. There's loads of arrows as well, and just drawing like half-blurred arrows is always a cool way to go.
Yeah, the action is so good. I'm gonna also give a shout out to the spider fight as well, because just, you know, Kit versus giant spider.
Oh yeah, in the diner.
Yeah, I really like that. That's really excellent. And just the design of said giant spider, and the giant spider that Tenderfoot that she pretends and she befriends, I should say. Mm-hmm. I just really like that. And there's that bit where she's riding along with the spider, with almost like, you know, with the dead spider almost, you know, as a cloak, and you know, and it's just this really menacing sort of look, and no wonder the highwaymen were a little bit taken aback seeing that coming towards them. Like, good lord. But yeah, like I say, it feels like a real world without being overly realistic, which seems a really bizarre way of putting it, but that's how it feels.
I think a lot of comics kind of fit into that little niche, don't they? Where it's realistic enough that it kind of fools your brain for a bit.
Yeah.
But not so realistic. Sometimes things look a bit uncanny when there's too much realism involved in the art, particularly in faces and stuff, and they start to look a bit weird.
Yeah. That's the other interesting thing about the faces, is that once you actually, it's almost like there's points where once you actually know that Kit is hiding her gender, you start to notice sort of bits of the way that her face is drawn. Just really subtle bits that are like, oh yeah, I see it now.
Yeah, I think it's a really good, like, androgynous look.
Yeah.
You know, where you can, I could sort of buy that Kit has passed off as male for, you'd assume, quite some time. But yeah, there's a certain kind of broad femininity, I guess, to Kit's drawing. But I think there is to Des as well. You know, there are certain times with Des where he kind of looks a bit androgynous also.
Yeah, which really works because it's sort of like, oh yeah, sort of Kit and also Des. They sort of, you can see why, you know, you would buy them both as the bestest Ranger Scouts that ever did Ranger.
Indeed. I think the colouring, the palette is really, really nice. I mean, you get quite a few different, you get like day and night cycles and lots of explosions. Like, it's a real range. Bright green lightning.
I was going to say the green lightning is probably my favourite. I really love that.
Acid rain. Like, yeah. I think it just a range of colours and how they're often used for, similarly to something like the onomatopoeia, you know, they're kind of used for effect. An explosion will be in sort of bright blue or something like that. It's a really, really nice book just to simply look at. I mean, not always nice. You know, the giant spiders are gross, but people get killed. But you know, there's the odd bit of blood. I have to say, special shout out to the flaming sword toward the end as well. Yeah, always love a flaming sword.
That's a really nice flaming sword. That is.
Again, because of my sort of slight lore nerdism, I want to know more about them. I want to know all the different ranges. Like, they're obviously different swords that do different things.
Yeah.
I want like an encyclopedic entry on the different. You do get a little bit of it. You do get it in some of the little info bits. I think they do give you a little bit about the different kind of swords that they have. But yeah, I wanted more of that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, there is some really nice imagery. But yes, more swords all the time, please.
Yeah. I think it obviously can't be helped because of what it is, but obviously the location never changes. You know, the background is always kind of the background of crumpled down buildings.
Yeah.
Again, I think that's maybe where the colouring gets at its best, is doing those kind of day nights and a bit more expressive colouring that might not necessarily be realistic.
Yeah.
But it's hard to criticise it for that, really.
I mean, I'm just looking at the bit where sort of Kit and Des are going, you know, out into the world, and it suddenly goes into purples and pinks, and that's when the kiss happens. And I just think that's clever, like that.
Absolutely, that sets a tone, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In fact, you get it earlier on. Issue 5 is a flashback where they are, I think, training or something in the Badlands, and they sit together and look at stars in the desert. And then
I love that bit. Yeah.
And again, it's all in kind of purple. You know, it feels like there's some suggestiveness there. Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff.
I like that. Yeah, that's probably my favourite bit, I think, is the bit where they're just there underneath the stars, and it's just like the two of them. And you know, as flashbacks go, it's really, really nice. But yeah, that whole page of just the two of them under the stars, and you really get the bond between them, is probably one of my favourite bits, aside from the spider fight.
Yeah. How do you feel about do you feel it stuck its landing?
Yeah.
It ended well within its 5 issues?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad it doesn't go any further. Like
Yeah.
you have a resolution, and you have this. It's a hopeful ending. They're they're basically pulling a tree up, and it might fail. The society might break down again. We don't know, but I like that it ends on such a hopeful note, because it just feels like it could have gone either way. It feels like it could have gone horrifically wrong.
Yeah, could have taken that path.
It could have gone, but yeah, I like that it's a hopeful ending, and it's like I don't need to see what happens next. I'm content with that. In another generation, that little girl that Kit's talking to could have grown up to be a terrible dictator and burned it all to the ground. I don't know. But I like that it ends where it does, and I don't need to see more than that.
I completely agree. I think hopeful is the word I would have picked as well. Like, I think it finishes with that sense of hope, but without being silly. Like, it doesn't flash forward 100 years and it's a utopic paradise. It doesn't try to sort of say, and then all of their problems were solved. It was so I think it's a good place. They've upturned the clearly rotten society, and they sort of talk about, they're not talking about that it's done. They're talking about it's like building it. This is a start again, and you get the impression that there's going to be conscious of the mistakes they've made, but as you say, it could all fall apart again, and that openness, I think, it makes the characters feel a bit more real, that their lives just go on now.
Yeah.
Rather than, having this sort of finite end where they can hold hands and just sing,
Sing Kumbaya around the campfire.
I was going to say, would they know Kumbaya? It would have been replaced with Scout songs.
Yes. Some sort of Ranger Scout equivalent.
So yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's a good ending. I think I said earlier, it's paced really well, I think, over 5 issues. And despite wanting more, I think the story that it was aiming to tell, like the central tale of Kit and Des, really.
Yeah.
I think it tells pretty well.
Yeah. It almost feels like this is a story that, years from now, in the hopeful future that hasn't burned and crashed, this is we will tell the story of Kit and Des, our founding fathers, and this was their story. And it's almost like this could become its own mythology.
Absolutely. In fact, that would be quite cool. Like another story 100 years in the future of the society that's built on this one, where they all praise Kit.
There's a little statue.
They've all got Kit's message wrong. Now it's a crazy matriarchy, and and it just flips back and forth. Then there's the Book of Des, and they don't like the the Kit followers.
Oh, you never know. You never know.
You're good friends with David Pepose now, so
I've
get him on the line.
interviewed him twice. Next time I interview him, because I'm sure there will be, I will ask him about that. Do Kit and Des found their own sort of cults? No. But yeah, no, like you said, I think it is really well paced. It never outstays its welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And each issue as well, because I read this, of course, in singles back in the day.
As did I.
And I think even as not all books work in singles, some of them that we have reviewed many times, we've said this will work better in trade. Indeed. Scout's Honor is not one of those, I feel. I think Scout's Honor worked issue by issue to move the story along, but also tell a little arc within that issue. Mm-hmm. And it read really well in singles just on its own, which I think is the sign of a well-paced book. If you can read it in singles and feel that the pacing in each issue is good, and then the pacing in the trade's good. So good pacing in conclusion. Pacing.
I would generally agree. Like singles, it's not my preferred reading method. I'm sure I've said that 1,000 times.
We just need to record you saying that, and then we'll just play it every episode.
Play it with like a little emergency button, so we know that. But I think you're right, actually. I think each issue does have a satisfying arc within its sort of 20 odd pages. If I was recommending it to somebody now, I'd still say just get the trade. Like it's a complete story that you can sit down and read from cover to cover. You don't have to know anything before. You don't have to know anything after. You don't have to be involved in a multi-film TV animation franchise.
Yes.
You can sit down. It'll probably take you about an hour. Have a read. It's like watching a film, and then that's it. Pop it on your shelf. Take it out again in a year's time and read it again.
Yeah, and reread it again and again.
Yeah.
Because we are bigger than capes, we are contractually obligated, or at least I am, to mention lettering.
Indeed.
It's good.
It's really good. Again, I think we mentioned it with Kill Lock, is like different people having sort of slightly different speech bubbles, and Weblo gets his own kind of little digital robot speech bubble. I'm glad that the text is still different than everyone else's. It doesn't have the same handwritten sort of feel, I guess, that the others. And also it's in lowercase, I've just noticed, when everything else is in uppercase.
Yeah.
But also it's not that really annoying, like digital, extremely sharp, sort of edged lettering. So I think because that would, I think, draw you out a little bit if it was too. I think definitely it would. I think it would. Well, normally because I just find it really irritating. But actually, because Weblo doesn't have a face or a mouth, I think it's important to know when it's Weblo talking. Because otherwise, it could be easily misconstrued. But I think, in particular, the onomatopoeia is excellent. I really love good onomatopoeia. I've got a bit here in the last issue where Des is on one of the like speeder bikes chasing Kit, who is on Tenderfoot the spider, like up a wall. He's driving up a wall, and as he's firing the machine gun, the rat-a-tat-a sound runs across the floor, and sort of showing the path of the bullets. And there are other really, really great examples. On the very next page, the vroom of his motorbike is blended into the smoke, and those bits. I think I really, really enjoy good onomatopoeia. It is one of those things that is only comic appropriate. It's something that only comics can do, and when it's done well, I always get a kick out of that.
I also like sort of the bits going all the way back to issue 1 where we have the feast/funeral, and you sort of have the bit where Scoutmaster Shepherds is like, yay for Kit, and then in the background they're all going, hail brother Kit. And it's just that's really nice. And sort of the bit where Ranger Scouts remember Hancock's first law, and then always be prepared is sort of there. And it's just, I like that. I think it's a really good way of sort of showing the almost cultish responses that the Ranger Scouts do. It's good.
But and I think we mentioned it last week as well, but they are very well placed speech bubbles. Perhaps good planning has gone in, but they don't cover any important bits of the art. They find neat little bits to go in that are never obtrusive. A little thing, but again, something I'm starting to appreciate more as you read when you get some bad versions and you think, I can't see what this is because it's got words on it, and the only word in it is BAM. Biff. You didn't need to cover up that picture for the word Biff.
No, it is. All levels of this creative team, and we have named them. They're all working really well, and it does feel like it's a proper collaboration. It's not just someone wrote it and then someone came along and did the art, and then someone came along and did the colours, and then someone came along and did the lettering. It feels like there was collaboration between all aspects of it, and it shows in the finished product.
Definitely. No, it feels well planned, and I think, as you say, collaborative feels like that's the peak word.
That's word of the day.
Although we have kind of, I guess, joked about it, would you welcome more of this?
I wouldn't.
Maybe.
I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I wouldn't. on the one hand, because I think it's so good and it works so well just as it is,
Mm-hmm.
it's like I don't want more to spoil it.
I'm doing a good thing.
Yeah, because that happens a lot with all kinds of media. It happens with television series, it happens with films, it happens with books. That, the unexpected sequel, which to me, anything that isn't planned to sort of have sequels generally doesn't work. There are exceptions, but generally doesn't work. So, yeah, I don't think I need to see any more of Scout's Honor. But if David Pepose wants to revisit this universe, I'm not going to say no, because I will literally read anything that man writes. So
I wasn't going to ask you whether you were going to read any more from the creators, because I know the answer is a hard yes. So.
Yeah, I've read everything he's done. I will continue to read everything he's done. So, yeah, I would be interested to sort of, because I wasn't that familiar with Luca Casalanguida, who is Spanish, I believe. I would be interested to see more of his art, because I think that is something I would actually look out more of that art.
Yeah, it's got art that's got a lot of range as well. Like, I have sort of said it's all set broadly in one place, but you do sometimes get some kind of interiors which are a bit more technologically based. Like, I could see his work applying well to sort of science fiction, or even to kind of like fantasy or something like that. If you consider the kind of open desert plains and riding spiders around, I think in terms of the comic world and what tends to be popular, I think I think they could do a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah, because I'm looking at his back catalogue now. A lot of James Bond on there. A lot of James Bond. I'm not a massive fan of James Bond comics. So who knows? Maybe I will check that out purely on his art. Maybe he'll get me to read some James Bond stuff. Who's to say?
Maybe so. I'm a firm believer that, like, you don't have to like everything.
No.
You don't have to like everything to be a fan. But yeah, so I think. Sorry, go on.
Would you read more by David Pepose?
Oh, my answer's pretty much the same as yours. I don't think the story itself needs any more to be said, but I am fascinated with how the world works, and if there were a sequel to be made, I think I would want it either set in a different part of the world with a different group of people and how they have survived. Maybe, more about the Highwaymen and how they have come together as a society, and how did they just survive the big beasts and the radiation and everything. Or it would be that idea of setting it somewhat in the future and, sort of seeing how these events have affected society going forwards would also be an interesting idea. But a direct sequel, I don't think is necessary. And I think you're right. I think you don't need to ruin a good thing there. No.
Have you read any of the OZ?
I've not. No, I think is it advertised at the end of one of the issues?
You should try the OZ. It was kickstarted. Issue 2's been kickstarted. Issue 1 is out there. You can get it through BackerKit and all the like. But yes, I think if you like Scout's Honor, you would like the OZ.
I think I will, but again, if we're kickstarting single issues, I will start that trade. Call me in a year.
Call me in a year. We'll note that down. We'll pledge when it's complete.
I mean, I've put it out there. Like, if any comics creators listening, I will just go straight for trade. So call me when it's in trade, and I'll be there.
Set up a notification, and will come and back your project.
Indeed.
That's good. Have we anything further to say on this most excellent comic, Scout's Honor?
Well, as the trade is coming out, it would be a high recommendation, I think, from both of us. I think that's fair to say. So do go out there and pick up a copy. You're right, it does still work in singles. So if it is that is your chosen method, it's still a good way to go. I'm not sure I have much more to add. I mean, it's really great. I'm glad that it is self-contained and it's a nice singular story. I'm more and more into that quite short read.
Yep.
And I will definitely check out more David Pepose work.
Yes, do.
And we'll keep my eye on all the creators involved, and
yeah,
really good. And I think this is another one like the Kill Lock that I think you championed early.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And once again, you've nailed it. Your hit ratio is.
I'm 2 for 2 so far.
Excellent at the moment. So.
Yeah.
So well done.
Thank you. It's definitely going to be one of my books of the year, which is a list which fortunately is very, very long at the moment.
Oh yeah.
But it's definitely up there, considering that the first issue came out in January. It is very much one of my books of 2021. So yes. So thank you for discussing this marvellous book with me, Will. It's appreciated.
You for having me. It's like I've come over your house for tea.
Yeah. Oh, we're still over Skype because, time and pandemic.
Time and diseases.
Yes. So, I've been Angela. I was joined by Will.
Bye.
And we've bye. And we have been half of Bigger Than Capes, but I like to think a quality half.
The Capes half. No, the bigger half.
Oh, we're the bigger half. Yeah. The Capes half were absent. So join us again for something else. I will probably try and foist another book upon these good folk. I've got plans. Yeah, certainly in the next couple of months there are plans. So yes, thank you very much. And remember that comics are
bigger than capes. Yeah, that was all over the place. Bigger Than Capes. Bye.
Bye.